Welcome to Books and Brews, Titletown's Patriots, an America 250 miniseries. This podcast is powered by NotebookLM. Today's weather forecast is powered by Fox Weather.
And honestly, what an incredible forecast it is.
Oh, it really is. I mean, just sitting out here today, right outside Drecky-Yord studios, we are looking at a beautifully breezy Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, the sun is just perfectly hitting Green Bay.
Exactly. It's June 25th, 2026. And the air has that, that perfect summer crispness to it.
It really does. Looking out at the peaceful streets right now, it's easy to forget how quickly all this tranquility can just vanish.
Right. Which kind of brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. I want you to try and imagine the absolute biggest superstar in the National Football League today.
Like the complete face of the franchise.
Exactly. Picture him at the absolute peak of his physical prime. Millions of dollars on the table, all those endorsement deals lining up, and fans wearing his jersey across the globe.
It's hard to even fathom anyone walking away from that today.
But that's a thing. Imagine him tearing up that incredibly lucrative contract, just walking right out of his cleats and voluntarily putting on combat boots to go hunt enemy submarines in the freezing Atlantic.
It sounds like the plot of a Hollywood movie.
It really does. But a few generations ago, it was just the reality of professional football.
Yeah, the contrast is jarring when you study the 1940s. We look around Green Bay today and see a community entirely organized around, the joy and the business of football.
Right.
But what we are unpacking today is the WW2 generation. That is the single largest generation of military veterans in Green Bay Packers history.
Over 40 players, right?
Yeah, over 40 players traded their football uniforms for military gear. I mean, the moment Pearl Harbor was attacked, the entire rhythm of American life, including the NFL, just fractured. It had to be rebuilt overnight.
Wow. So our goal today is to explore those specific stories, right? To understand how a working-class football town mobilized for a global war. And to really ground us in that era, if you are drinking along with us, our first featured beverage today is called the Cypher's Blackout Brew.
Which is an intense drink.
Very intense. This is a dark, heavy drink. We're talking 6 ounces of strong dark roast coffee, 1 teaspoon of roasted chicory root, 1 tablespoon of blackstrap molasses, and just a pinch of cinnamon.
And that recipe right there is a perfect window into the home front.
How so?
Well, during WW2, the merchant ships that normally brought coffee beans from South America, they were either repurposed for troop transport or, they were actively being sunk by U-boats.
Right. The supply chains were devastated.
Exactly. So coffee was strictly rationed. Americans had to figure out how to stretch a tiny, tiny supply.
So that's where the chicory comes in.
Yep. They used roasted chicory because it mimics that woody, bitter depth of coffee without using actual beans.
Okay, but what about the molasses? Why not just use sugar?
Because sugar was actually being diverted to manufacture munitions.
Wait, really? Sugar for munitions?
Yeah, specifically they needed the glycerin for explosives. So people turned to blackstrap molasses for sweetness and raw calories. I mean, this drink is a literal taste of rationing. It was entirely about survival.
Survival is a great word for it, actually, because that is exactly what the NFL was trying to do at the time. I mean, over 40 Packers left. When you look at that number, it really makes you realize the league was just bleeding talent.
Oh, absolutely. The draft was an existential threat to professional football.
The early professional leagues had barely survived the 1920s and 30s, right?
Right. The WW1 doughboy generation, the men who fought in the trenches of France, they came back and basically built the Packers franchise out of the dirt.
But then the WW2 generation was asked to leave it all behind.
Exactly. The NFL was not some multi-billion-dollar corporate machine back then. It was a very fragile regional league.
So when the war started, teams were relying on what? Just anyone they could find.
Pretty much. Medically disqualified men, teenagers, older retired players, basically anyone just to field a roster.
I read that some teams even had to merge.
Yeah. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles actually combined to form the Steelers just to avoid total bankruptcy.
See, I always look at that and wonder about the mentality of the players. I mean, these guys had fought tooth and nail during the Great Depression just to get paid to play a game.
Right.
They finally achieved some stability,
Hey.
and then they walked away. We think of the NFL today as this unstoppable machine. But back then, was the league actually in danger of completely collapsing because so many men left?
Oh, 100%. And for them, the game simply ceased to be the most important thing in the world.
Wow.
They were entirely willing to let the league fold if that was the cost of defeating fascism. It's this profound reprioritization of what actually matters.
That is incredible to think about.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be right back after this short break.
Hey everyone, if you are fascinated by the history of this team and the community, you definitely need to check out the Tales from the Frozen Tundra podcast.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic deep dive into storytelling and history.
It really is. So make sure to find and subscribe to Tales from the Frozen Tundra wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are back, which naturally brings us to the titans of the franchise.
Yeah.
It's one thing for, a rookie or a bench player to get drafted.
Sure.
But it is another thing entirely when the legends of the game, men who already had everything to lose, stepped away.
The superstars.
Exactly. So to honor that specific tension between fame and duty, our second featured drink today is the Gold Jacket Vault Sizer.
This one is interesting.
Yeah, we are mixing 4 ounces of traditional sweet mead with 4 ounces of dry, hard American Heritage apple cider.
Okay.
And then we garnish it with a lightly charred cinnamon stick.
So a sizer is essentially a historical preserver. It was a way of fermenting whatever sugars were available.
So how does that connect to these players?
Well, the balance in this drink really tells a story. You have the sweetness of the mead, right? Which represents their incredible athletic success. But then it crashes into that dry, harsh cider.
Representing their military reality.
Yeah, exactly. And that charred cinnamon stick isn't just for looks. It grounds the drink in the physical environment these men lived in, which were bivouacs.
And for the listener who might not know, a bivouac is...
It's a temporary, makeshift military camp.
Right. So instead of sleeping in luxury hotels before a game, these absolute superstars were sleeping on the frozen ground, under canvas tents, smelling wood smoke and damp earth.
Yeah, it's a complete reality shift.
Let's talk about a name that really requires no introduction around here. Don Hutson.
The NFL's first true superstar.
Right. If you watch modern football today, you are essentially watching the game Don Hutson invented. He created the split-end position by lining up far out wide, away from the offensive line, just to isolate defenders.
He essentially invented the timing-based passing game, too.
Right. Where a receiver runs to a specific spot on the field and the quarterback throws it there before the receiver even turns his head.
Which is standard today, but back then it was magic.
So when WW2 broke out, Hutson joined the U.S. Army Air Forces.
Yeah, and his service is a really fascinating study in how the military deployed human assets.
Because he served stateside, right?
He did. The military looked at him and didn't see an infantryman. They saw an absolute master of physical conditioning and leadership.
So they assigned him to train airmen.
Thousands of them, yeah.
Yeah.
He ran these grueling physical conditioning programs, ensuring the men who were going overseas to fly bombers and fight in dogfights were at their absolute physical peak.
I want to push back on that a little bit, though. You have guys shipping out to the Pacific and Europe, actively taking fire, and the biggest star in the league gets to stay in the United States running PT drills.
Wow.
I mean, he even managed to balance his military duties with playing for the Packers, leading them to a championship in 1944. Yeah. Was there resentment in the locker room about who got the quote-unquote safe jobs and who went into combat?
That is a highly debated dynamic for sure. But you have to look at the rigid structure of the 1940s military. The players didn't choose their assignments.
The War Department did.
Right. And the military was intensely pragmatic. They knew morale and physical readiness were just as critical to the war effort as pulling a trigger.
So keeping him stateside was on purpose.
Exactly. Having Don Hutson prepare troops while occasionally suiting up on Sundays boosted morale on the home front tremendously. It wasn't favoritism, it was strategic allocation of an elite asset.
Okay, that makes sense. But then you have a guy like Tony Canadeo.
Ah, the gray ghost of Gonzaga.
Right. He took a completely different path. He was really emerging as this incredible offensive weapon for Curly Lambeau, and then he joins the U.S. Army.
And he deploys overseas.
He does. He completely misses the 1944 NFL championship and the entire 1945 season.
The physical toll of what Tony Canadeo did, it cannot be overstated. If you are an elite professional athlete, taking 2 years off in your 20s to go fight a global war usually ends your career.
Because everything changes.
Everything. Your diet changes to military rations, your training regimen completely vanishes, and your muscle memory fades. Plus, you are under constant grinding stress.
And the game of football was so much more brutal back then.
Oh, yes. This was the single wing era of football.
Explain that for the listener.
Well, the single wing wasn't the modern game where a quarterback drops back into a clean pocket to pass. It was this brute force, rugby-like formation.
Just a wall of bodies.
Exactly. The ball was snapped directly to a runner who plunged into a wall of leather helmets. Everyone blocked, everyone tackled. It was basically trench warfare on grass.
Wow.
To step away from that, endure an overseas military deployment, and then come back to the Packers leaner and tougher is biologically astonishing.
And he didn't just survive his return. He became the first Packer in history to rush for 1,000 yards in a single season.
Which is just an unbelievable milestone.
Then there's Clarke Hinkle, the Iron Man. He was famous for these legendary bone-crushing collisions with the Bears' Bronco Nagurski.
Two absolute powerhouses.
Right. And Hinkle didn't just take a leave of absence. He permanently ended his Hall of Fame career in 1942 to enlist in the U.S. Coast Guard.
And coastal defense in 1942 was not a quiet assignment.
Not at all.
German U-boats were actively prowling the eastern seaboard of the United States, literally sinking merchant vessels right off the coast.
So Hinkle traded the violent collisions of the gridiron for escorting supply convoys and actively hunting enemy submarines in freezing waters.
Yeah, just think about that swap.
Which brings me back to the question of legacy. Does stepping away from military service actually enhance their football legacy in the eyes of history, rather than diminish it by losing those stat-building years? Because on paper, Hinkle lost years of numbers he could have put up.
Well, if we evaluate legacy purely by math, maybe it diminishes it. But if we evaluate it by character, it elevates them into a completely different stratosphere.
That's a great point.
True sports mythology is built on what a player is willing to sacrifice. By abandoning their fame when the world was on fire, men like Hinkle and Canadeo proved their toughness wasn't just a performance.
They were real.
It was authentic. They traded statistical immortality for actual heroism.
That distinction right there between performance and authenticity, that is the perfect bridge to the men whose military careers eclipse their football stats entirely.
The ordinary servicemen.
Exactly. We'll be right back after this short break.
Before we move on, we have to mention the 4th and 20 podcast.
Oh, absolutely. If you want some of the best football insights and discussions around, you need to add them to your rotation.
Definitely. So search for the 4th and 20 podcast and hit subscribe. You won't regret it.
All right, welcome back. Let's look at the ordinary serviceman. To set the tone for these unsung WW2 Packers, our final featured drink is the Gunpowder and Glory Tea.
A very fitting name.
Yeah, so for this one, we take 1 heaping teaspoon of tightly rolled gunpowder green tea, add a pinch of smoky Lapsang Souchong tea leaves, steep it hot, and squeeze a fresh lemon wedge right over the top.
This beverage is incredibly tactile.
Because of the leaves.
Yeah, gunpowder tea gets its name because the leaves are rolled into these tiny, tight pellets. It was originally done so the tea could survive long, damp ocean voyages without going stale.
And what about the Lapsang Souchong?
Well, that is pine smoked, which gives off a really sharp, distinct aroma of a campfire. It forces you to think about the harsh outdoor realities these soldiers faced.
The gunpowder pellets and that campfire smoke aroma perfectly symbolize uncovering the hidden, explosive histories of men who saw active, terrifying combat.
It really does.
Speaking of harsh realities, the story of Hal Van Every is almost too intense to believe.
It really is wild.
He's a 1940 first-round draft pick, a highly touted, multi-threat halfback. The war hits, and he joins the U.S. Army Air Forces and becomes a B-17 bomber pilot.
And just for context, flying a B-17 over Europe was statistically one of the most lethal assignments in the entire war.
Because they were giant targets.
Right. The cabins were unpressurized and freezing, and you were flying through literal clouds of exploding anti-aircraft flak.
And on Van Every's 9th mission over Germany, his bomber shot out of the sky. He
survives the crash somehow.
But his ordeal is just beginning, because he is captured by the Nazis and sent to the notorious Stalag Luft III POW camp.
Which was a high-security camp run by the Luftwaffe, specifically designed to hold captured Allied airmen.
That's the camp from the movie The Great Escape, right?
Exactly. It was famously built on sandy soil to prevent tunneling, though the prisoners managed to pull off that massive escape there anyway. But I want you to think about the day-to-day existence of a first-round NFL draft pick locked inside that wire.
It's hard to imagine.
He spent a year surviving on starvation rations. We're talking watery turnip soup and sawdust bread.
Sawdust bread.
Yeah, literal sawdust mixed in, all while enduring psychological isolation and freezing winters.
And he survived it, which is a miracle in itself.
Truly.
And you look at a guy like Bob Forte, his timeline just breaks my brain.
Oh, Forte's story is unbelievable.
He is drafted by the Packers in 1943, But instead of reporting to training camp, he ships out as a first lieutenant in the Army's 8th Armored Division.
Fighting directly under General George S. Patton.
Wow. So he is literally spearheading the Allied advance across Europe in tank battalions. He gets wounded in action. He recovers, somehow gets his body back into professional football shape, and finally debuts for the Packers in 1946.
And he becomes a phenomenal defensive back.
Right. But then, the 1950s roll around, and he gets a letter recalling him to active duty for the Korean War.
The recall system in the military was so jarring. After WW2, many officers remained in the reserves. So when the Korean conflict erupted suddenly, the military desperately needed experienced combat leaders.
He had to go back.
He had to go back. I mean, to survive the European theater, recover from combat wounds, fight your way onto an NFL roster, and then be told to pack your bags and go back to war.
It's staggering.
The quiet, uncomplaining duty of that act is just staggering, yeah.
We also have to mention Wes Carlson. He only played a single season for Green Bay back in 1926.
But his military legacy is massive.
Right. He became a Navy commander serving in Africa, the Pacific, and Asia during WW2, and he earned a Bronze Star and, more importantly, a Silver Star.
And for context on that, the Silver Star is the third highest military combat decoration a service member can receive for gallantry in action.
So he was seeing serious combat.
Carlson was constantly under fire. His time in Green Bay was just a tiny footnote compared to what he did for his country.
Now, these stories are really just the tip of the iceberg. As we move forward in this mini-series, we're going to dive deep into men like Ken Krantz, who flew highly dangerous transport missions.
There are so many stories left to tell.
Exactly. But I also want to plant a flag for a name every single person listening should know. Howard Smiley Johnson.
Smiley Johnson's story is really the emotional anchor of this entire era.
Tell us a bit about him.
He was a Marine Corps first lieutenant, known as this fiercely tough but incredibly upbeat guard for the Packers. But tragically, he is the only known Green Bay Packer to be killed in action. Yeah. He died leading his men at the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945, and he earned 2 Silver Stars for his bravery. We are going to dedicate significant time to his story later in the series because it fundamentally changes how you view the history of this team.
I want to unpack that for the listener right now. When you sit at Lambeau Field today, you're sitting in a stadium built on the backs of men who survived POW camps and artillery fire. How does preserving these specific, gritty stories change the way modern fans experience the game of football?
Well, I think it strips away the superficiality of modern sports.
How so?
We use words like warrior and battle so casually when talking about a Sunday afternoon football game. But when you understand that the men who built the culture of this team actually lived through the bloodiest global conflict in human history, well, the colors green and gold carry a completely different weight.
It grounds your fandom.
It does. It is a stark reminder that the very freedom to gather in a stadium and cheer was paid for by the men who previously wore those jerseys.
That is beautifully said. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hey everyone, we just want to take a quick second to talk about the Tales from the Frozen Tundra Kickstarter campaign.
Yes, please consider supporting them. It is grassroots funding from listeners like you that ensures these vital histories are kept alive.
Exactly. We don't want these unsung heroes to be forgotten by the next generation, so go support the Kickstarter if you can.
Welcome back. As we look ahead to episode 3, we are going to explore Korea, Cold War, and the Lombardy years.
That is going to be a great one.
Yeah, we will examine how the global tensions of the 1950s and 60s shaped the legendary dynasty of Vince Lombardi, and we'll look closely at the players called up during the Berlin crisis.
The through line here is just so vital. I mean, this America 250 miniseries is a celebration of America's 250th birthday, but it's told entirely through the deeply personal lens of the veterans who wore the green and gold.
Right. By studying a single community, the Green Bay Packers, we get a microscopic view of the massive sacrifices that shaped the entire nation. We encourage you to return for the next deep dive. Please share this series with your fellow Packers fans, with history buffs, and really with anyone who appreciates the gritty realities of American history. And again, please support the Tales from the Frozen Tundra Kickstarter campaign.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We've detailed the horrors of unpressurized bomber cabins, the starvation of POW camps, and the freezing Atlantic waters today.
Yeah.
I want you to think about the sheer psychological willpower required to survive that level of human suffering, only to come home and willingly subject your battered body to the brutality of 1940s professional football.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
You don't have to do it. You've already survived hell. Yet they put the leather helmets back on and plunged right back into the line of scrimmage. What does that tell you about the desperate human need for camaraderie, the healing power of a team, and the unbreakable toughness of that specific generation?
Happy birthday, America.
Go Pack Go.